Let's be honest, shall we? Microwavable brownies are an abomination, an insult to cocoa beans and sugar everywhere. They are Satan's snack, a sticky, synthetic simulacrum of a true culinary delight. They promise fudgy goodness and deliver only despair. They are the culinary equivalent of a cheap magic trick, all illusion and no substance. And yet sometimes in the darkest depths of our kitchens, we find ourselves drawn to their siren song of convenience. We tell ourselves it will be different this time. That this time, the brownie will emerge from its plastic sarcophagus transformed into a molten chocolate dream. We are always wrong. The brownie, like some malevolent phoenix, rises from the microwave, not in glory, but in a cloud of disappointment and the faint scent of burnt sugar. It is a lie we tell ourselves again and again. And it is a lie that, in the case of our protagonist, is about to get a whole lot worse. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something faintly sinister. It was a scent that clung to everything, a constant reminder of the devastation that had swept through the town. Hurricane Matthew had left its mark on the coastal town. The once vibrant community now lay in ruins, a shadow of its former self. Streets that were once bustling with life were now eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of a damaged structure or the distant sound of water dripping. Houses were reduced to splintered wreckage, trees lay like fallen giants, and the streets were a treacherous labyrinth of debris. The sheer scale of the destruction was overwhelming, a testament to the hurricane's unforgiving power. Our protagonist, let's call him Arthur, surveyed the damage to his own home with a weary sigh. His once cozy abode was now a shell of its former self, a place that barely resembled the sanctuary it had once been. The roof had sprung a leak, the windows were boarded up, and a damp, musty odor permeated everything. The walls, once adorned with family photos and cherished memories, were now stained and peeling.
This is going to be a long cleanup. Arthur's voice was tinged with frustration and exhaustion, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on him.
Arthur pushed open his front door, the familiar creak now sounding more ominous than comforting, and stepped inside. The power was still out, and the only light came from the thin slivers that pierced through the boarded-up windows. The room was cast in an eerie twilight, shadows dancing on the walls. Dust motes danced in the stagnant air. He sighed again, this time with a note of despair. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the leaking roof. All he wanted was a hot shower and a decent meal, two things that seemed impossibly out of reach at that moment. The bathroom, once a place of solace, was now a reminder of everything he had lost. Instead, he settled for a bottle of lukewarm water and the last remaining comfort in his disaster-stricken life, a microwavable brownie. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it was enough to keep him going. Arthur knew that the road to recovery would be long and arduous, but he was determined to rebuild, to restore some semblance of normalcy to his life. As he took a bite of the brownie, he allowed himself a moment of hope, a small glimmer of light in the darkness that surrounded him. He picked up a family photo from the debris. The glass cracked, but the image still intact. It was a reminder of what he was fighting for, a symbol of resilience and the strength of the human spirit. Arthur knew that as long as he held on to that, he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun began to rise over the devastated town, casting a warm glow over the wreckage. It was a new day, a new beginning, and with it came the promise of rebuilding, of healing, and of hope. Arthur took a deep breath, steeling himself for the work ahead. Home, sweet, ruined home. But it was still home, and that was enough. The microwave whirred into life, its dull hum a counterpoint to the symphony of dripping water and creaking timbers that formed the soundtrack to Arthur's current existence. The house, once a place of comfort and warmth, now felt like a relic of a forgotten time, each creak and drip a reminder of the chaos that had upended his life. He watched as the brownie rotated slowly, its edges already beginning to bubble ominously. The sight was almost hypnotic, The slow, deliberate rotation of the dessert, a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. He had hoped for a moment of solace, a brief escape from the relentless stress that had become his daily reality. The familiar wave of disappointment washed over him. It was a feeling he had grown accustomed to, a constant companion in these trying times. The brownie, once a symbol of simple pleasure, now seemed to mock him with its inadequacy. Even in the best of times, this was a poor substitute for a real dessert. The texture was always off, the taste never quite right. But now, with everything else falling apart, it felt like a cruel reminder of all that he had lost. Now, in the aftermath of a natural disaster, it felt like a cruel joke. The storm had taken so much from him, his home, his peace of mind, and now, even the small comfort of a decent dessert. It was as if the universe was conspiring to strip away every last vestige of normalcy from his life.
Even this is a joke now. The words slipped out before he could stop them, a bitter acknowledgement of the absurdity of his situation.
He pulled open the microwave door, a plume of sugary steam hitting him in the face. The heat was almost suffocating, a stark contrast to the cold, damp air that permeated the rest of the house. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the warmth wash over him, a fleeting illusion of comfort. The brownie sat there, pulsating slightly, its surface an unappetizing landscape of craters and molten pools. It looked more like a science experiment gone wrong than a treat. The sight was almost grotesque, a twisted parody of the comfort food he had once enjoyed, and that's when he saw it. Something moved beneath the surface of the brownie, a writhing, pulsing shadow. His heart skipped a beat, a cold dread settling in the pit of his stomach. What was that? Was it his imagination, or was there really something alive in there? Arthur stared, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were telling him. The logical part of his brain insisted that it was impossible, that there was no way something could be moving inside a brownie. But the evidence was right in front of him, undeniable and terrifying. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of his exhaustion. It was a fear that went beyond the rationale, tapping into something deep and instinctual. He felt a shiver run down his spine, his body reacting to a threat that his mind could barely comprehend. This was wrong, very wrong. The realization hit him like a physical blow, a sudden, jarring awareness that something was terribly amiss. He took a step back, his eyes never leaving the brownie, as if afraid that whatever was inside might escape if he looked away. It emerged slowly at first, pushing its way up through the molten chocolate like some unholy sea creature breaching the surface of a tar pit. The chocolate bubbled and hissed as the creature forced its way through, the surface tension breaking apart to reveal the monstrosity beneath. It was as if the dessert itself was giving birth to a nightmare, a grotesque parody of life emerging from the sweet molten depths. It was a worm, that much was clear. But this was no ordinary worm that one might find in the garden or on a rainy day. This was something far more sinister, something that seemed to defy the natural order of things. But it was no ordinary earthworm. Its size alone was enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. It was as thick as a man's arm and several feet long, its body undulating with a sickening rhythm as it moved. This creature was larger, pulsing with an unnatural luminescence, its segmented body glistening with a viscous slime. Each segment seemed to glow with an eerie, otherworldly light, casting strange shadows on the walls and ceiling. The slime that coated its body dripped onto the table, hissing and steaming as it made contact with the surface. It had a gaping maw filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth, and its eyes, two black pinpricks, glittered with malevolent intelligence. The teeth were arranged in concentric circles, each one sharper and more menacing than the last. Its eyes seemed to bore into Arthur's soul, as if it could see his deepest fears and darkest secrets.
What in the...
Arthur stumbled back, dropping his makeshift fork with a clatter. The sound echoed in the otherwise silent room, a stark contrast to the horror unfolding before him. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the terror he was facing. He watched in horrified fascination as the creature pulled itself free of the brownie, its body leaving a trail of steaming, viscous goo in its wake. The brownie, once a source of comfort and joy, was now a ruined, grotesque mess, tainted by the presence of this abomination. It was the stuff of nightmares, a creature that defied all reason and logic. Its very existence seemed to challenge the natural order, a blasphemy against the world as Arthur knew it. He couldn't tear his eyes away, even as every instinct screamed at him to run, and it was staring at him with what he could only describe as hungry curiosity. The creature's eyes seemed to twinkle with a perverse delight, as if it was savoring the fear it was causing. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. His initial shock gave way to a surge of white-hot fury. How dare this thing invade his home, his sanctuary? How dare it ruin the one small comfort he had left in this world? This thing, this abomination, had ruined the last vestige of comfort in his life. The brownie, a simple pleasure in an otherwise bleak existence, was now a symbol of his helplessness and rage. It was the final straw. Arthur had endured enough. The stress, the exhaustion, the endless string of disappointments and failures, it all culminated in this moment. He could feel something inside him snap, a resolve hardening in his chest.
Oh no, you don't. Not today.
Arthur, fueled by a potent mix of stress, exhaustion, and cheap whiskey, decided he was going to fight back. This was war. He grabbed the nearest object, a heavy cast-iron skillet, and brandished it like a weapon. His hands trembled, but his grip was firm. He was ready to face this nightmare head-on, to reclaim his sanctuary from the horrors that had invaded it. The creature seemed to sense his determination, its eyes narrowing as it prepared to strike. But Arthur was ready. He would not be defeated, not today.